So I looked at the clock a couple minutes ago, and it said it was 5:15. And if you know how I am about my numbers, 5:15 is my great grandma's number, because that was her birthday was May 15th. So when I see 5:15, that's Mila time. And it was funny because I had my camera up, and I hadn't turned it on yet, but I made some kind of face at myself, and for some reason it reminded me of my grandma in that moment. So it's like, oh, that's fitting. So yeah, I came over to the school to skate today, and I actually started a video earlier at the cemetery after I walked the dogs. And there was nobody in the whole place. And then all at once, like in the last 2 minutes we were, or probably more like 5 minutes that we were there, got interrupted like 3 times. It's like, you know what, we're just gonna call it, because I'm ready to be done. Forget it. So we went home, played some ball, and it's kind of chilly out, so I went inside and sat in front of the fireplace for a few minutes. And when I did, I noticed that there was one of these little plastic plug covers to keep little kids' fingers out of the outlets, that had gotten kind of partially shoved up under the corner of the fireplace. So I used my foot to pull it out, and apparently I hit it just right and knocked the whole front over, and it fell down on my left knee. And that thing is heavy. And my first thought was, shit, I want to skate today. So don't worry, I did not let it stop me. All I could see right at that moment, there was immediately a little bit of a bruise, but nothing huge. And then a little bit before I left, there was like a little knot that was starting to come up. Don't worry, I didn't let that stop me. I skated. And yeah, I was walking on it fine. It didn't really hurt too much. I mean, it wasn't pleasant in the moment. I was just glad it fell on me and not the dog. But any of the dogs. But when I got over here, I put my, I forget what it's called. Oh, my gasket on for my knee pad, to keep my knee pad from slipping around. And it's like, this might be a little tight. And normally, well, I mean, mind you, I have like 2 pairs of leggings on and leg warmers because it's chilly. And that was how I went to my niece's soccer game this morning. Yeah. But the gasket seemed a little snugglier than normal, but still didn't let that stop me. And I probably should have let it stop me, but that's not me. Because I think in the first mile, actually, I think it was more like the first half a mile, I tripped over just a little hole in the asphalt, and I caught myself. I didn't go all the way down, but it was a process, and it kind of felt like I was going to bust out into the Beyonce single lady stance. Yeah, on my toe stops, but I didn't fall. However, I was laughing at myself as I continued on, and then I did stumble a couple other times. It's like, I should really probably call it a day, but I didn't want to stop before I had my 3 miles in, because I'm weird. I like it to the minimum as 3. I mean, because otherwise, it's like, today it's kind of windy, so it was like a 12.5 minute mile. So I didn't want to just stop there. So I got at least a half hour in. I think it's like close to 40 minutes. But yeah, it didn't slow me down. My knee is a little sore, but it's not immensely. But it was more like I just couldn't put my full... I mean, I could put my weight on it, but not for extended periods of time, and it felt like my knee was saying, no, dummy, get off. So, yeah. Anyway, so yesterday I did, where I came over here to the school and did a video because I was all agitated, and it ended up being for a while. And it was kind of funny because at one point I was talking about how this whole YouTube thing, I don't know what I'm doing with it. I don't know why, or how long it's going to be, or if it's going to be an ongoing thing, blah, blah, blah. And then, of course, on my YouTube suggestions, tarot readings are pretty much, I watch tarot readings and music videos. And that's the extent of my social media consumption these days. I'll get on Facebook here and there for like no more than an hour in an entire week, honestly. It's usually just on, check the notifications, or anything else going on, close it and done. And I think that bothered Facebook for a while, because then they started sending me emails when the notifications weren't going through. And then I told them to stop sending me emails. So now I don't get all the notifications until I go on there. It's like, that's better. I don't need them. I don't need them unless I am there already. And usually the only reason I go there is because somebody sent me a video that happened to be linked on Facebook. And I have to be logged in to do it. And then, well, hey, since I'm already there. Anyway. So yesterday I mentioned that it was kind of, I wasn't sure what I was doing with it. And then I went home and there was this, I think it was a Chloe Taylor tarot reading that popped up from like, I think June of 2022. And for the pile that I picked, the topic, I believe, was something like what your spirit guides want you to know, or something to that effect. And the big point was, she emphasized, you already know what you're supposed to be doing. Just do it and stop keeping yourself in a beginner's mindset, and needing to let go of the imposter syndrome and just do it because I already know what I'm supposed to be doing. And I was thinking about it, and it's like, okay, first off, I said in the information about me or whatever, what my page is for, or what my channel's for, is a vlog that's basically my healing journey, right? So it says right there what I'm doing. And so basically, why am I still protesting it or dragging my feet about it? Or otherwise acting like I don't know what I'm doing, because that's precisely what the purpose of the thing is. And, all that, I came up with a little blurb when I did, was just because I needed something on there. I felt like I needed something on there to give me more direction of what I was doing. It's kind of funny because I have the tendency where I'll put something and then, it feels a little off when I'm doing it. It's like, are you though? Are you really doing this thing? And then I'll go back to it. It's like, oh yeah, I kind of am for whatever reason. But yeah, she was talking in the reading about it's time to step into phase 2. It's like, what's phase 2? It's phase 2, just the part where I start doing it more regularly? Because I mean, once every week or two, it definitely doesn't do a whole lot. And it keeps me anxious or slow about getting back into it. So maybe phase 2 is just the part where I start acting like this is the thing I'm doing for the time being. Even if nobody else knows about it except for me and like 4 of my friends. Yeah. I also mentioned yesterday that I was talking about like anytime something comes up that seems a little bit out of place, like I was talking about the oracle cards that I drew and how one of them was like very much a contrast to the other 2 cards that I had pulled, and it was talking about fear and accepting that it's a human emotion that you're just gonna have to deal with, and understand that that's for the whole human experience. You have to feel the range of the emotions, but it's about not letting it control you and consume you. But it was kind of like I didn't think there was anything I was dealing with that seemed relevant on the fear issue. Not directly. But then I think it kind of was a prelude, I guess, for what was coming. Because this morning, I mean, I can't say that it's necessarily something I'm actively afraid of happening. It's more one of those thoughts way in the back of my mind that has kept me from jumping in fully, I think. Like this morning, I found myself processing through whenever this gets out there, wherever there is, and should my ex find it, since I've talked about him on it a little bit, or should my family find it because I've talked about them a little bit on here, what that would look like, feel like. I think it's just something I needed to kind of think through. Because, like, with my ex, I shifted into, while we were together, I remember thinking very much that it's like, whatever I do, I know I'm supposed to write. And however that turns out, if it goes really, really well, I don't want him having anything to do with that. I want him long out of the picture and unable to jump in and say, well, you could have done this without me or whatever. And I think that, especially knowing how he was on that end, with if anything good happened, it was because of him, and if anything bad happened, it was because of me. And like pushing that belief at me as much as he possibly could. I think I just kind of developed a block where I didn't want to do the thing that I knew I was supposed to be doing, because there was an underlying hesitation that it would somehow make him reappear. I don't want him to reappear anymore, y'all. He did his damage, and that was more than enough. But yeah, I think it was something that I just had to look at and realize that it was something that was causing me to hesitate on doing the stuff that I have felt like I'm supposed to be doing. And yeah. At the same time, it's, I've mentioned the whole twin flame thing, and the purpose of that being part of my path was for the sole purpose of making me choose to get out of my comfort zone and do something different. Because I had pretty much shut down when I left my ex. It was just so emotionally and mentally exhausted, and I didn't want to have to worry about any of that coming up. And there have been things that, okay, I'll just tell a little story. In March 2019 is when I left him for good. And there was still I was trying to shut him out completely, but he would still find a way. There was enough that we had that we were still in the process of separating, since we'd actually been married, that it was a struggle. And, like the cell phones. My parents were trying to get me back on their plan so I could come off of his plan. And he was dragging his feet about doing it, about releasing my number. And in fact, I pissed him off at one point where he renamed my phone on the account. It was just bitch in capital letters. Which was actually helpful, because I took a screenshot of that, and we were able to use that, show that to Verizon and be like, hey, this is the situation I'm trying to get out of. And so they were able to switch it over without his permission. Yeah, that's the whole thing. Ugh, it's ridiculous. But, after that happened, then he got to where he was just trying to fuck with me as much as he could. And luckily he only had like 4 of my family members' phone numbers, because he put the child lock on it, so my mom, my dad, my aunt, and my cousin couldn't contact me. And I couldn't contact them. And, we caught it immediately, because I was trying to talk to my mom I was trying to send her something when I noticed that he had done that. And yeah, it was an ordeal. It was just little tedious stuff. So we had to have Verizon undo that. And it got to a point where it was like, you know what? Verizon had a deal where if you bought a new line, then you got, there's like a buy one, get one deal on 2 phones. And I was just like, it's like, I am not overly attached to this phone number. So we ended up doing that and getting me a new phone number. It's like, oh, thank God. And I told the attorney that we were dealing with that I would really prefer him not have my new phone number. It was on the top of the paperwork, and he got it anyway. In the summer, or this part was like June and early July that this was all going down. So I think toward the end of July, I got to the point where I was beyond tired of dealing with it, and I knew that if we went to court to try to deal with the divorce and get it all done that way, all that was going to happen was my parents and I were just going to waste a bunch of money going back and forth from Indiana to Alabama for court dates, however that worked out. And I feel like he was trying to bribe me into doing this because he told me he wasn't going to get an attorney or anything. He was going to fight himself. And I was like, I already know what this is going to look like because I've seen it in action. I saw all the legal ordeal with between him and his son's mom. And I knew from experience he liked making people think that they were crazy and losing their mind. So, yeah, I knew I didn't want to go down there just to continue that treatment. So I decided to make this deal where I said that I left, or what I left with was all I would go after. I wasn't going after anything else. But the stipulation was he had to sign the divorce paperwork within, I think it was like 4 or 5 business days. I think it was 4. But I said it, I sent this big long email and I told his mom why I knew I was never coming back and it was completely done. And I said, I know if I don't tell you about it, he's going to ignore it and let it, or make it so we have to go to court because he's not going to sign the paperwork. I said, so I want you to help push him into doing it so we can just be done. And she did. I knew she would. Because she didn't want to get stuck with any more of his legal shit. And I told her, it's like, you know, he spent the entire time that we were together trying to make everybody believe that the only reason I was with him was for his money. And, you know, I talked about how I knew he was always going to make more than I was in like these regular real world jobs. Just because it's the nature of his job versus the jobs that I had. Like, okay, when my degree is in psychology, that right there, I mean, you don't do a whole lot with it unless you get further degrees. And I kind of started that way and then changed the plan. And yeah. So I had a bachelor's in psychology. Then I got my master's degree in, it's a master's of divinity. So I went to seminary and got that. And at the time I was debating on Army chaplaincy. And didn't take long for me to figure out that's definitely not going to happen. So my goal in going to seminary was always writing, But, I wasn't really sure, like, what the job situation on that end would look like. I'm going to say while I was with him versus after him, because I don't think I could have pursued anything seriously while I was with him, because I was not in a good headspace. And we both knew that. I've said here before, like, I was not a whole person when we met, and that was why that relationship went as far as it did. It never should have, and if I was in a good headspace at any point in that path, it would not have. But alas, it was a valuable learning experience. But I knew he was just out to prove to everybody that he told this story to that was the case, that I was just after him for his money. And, he completely blew off the fact that I spent literally 6 months combing through everything for his legal case, to the extent where when it was time for court, I was the one person that was on the stand the second longest amount of time, just because I knew the case so well inside and out. And while I was investing all this time and energy on this thing that wasn't even mine, he'd come home from work and be like, "What'd you do today?" "Nothing," and lazy, and start that kind of bullshit. And it's like, it's not like I'm not contributing, because he very much wanted somebody else to deal with his stuff and not have to do it himself. And I did, for far too long. So, knowing that he was just out to prove this story that he was telling to the world, I told his mom, it's like, I don't want any money. I don't want anything else that I didn't already leave with. I have my dogs, and that's the most important thing to me anyway. So I kind of pushed her to push him. And it was just one email, very thorough. This is why I'm not coming back. This is why I'm done. And basically help me get out of this. And she pushed him, so I knew she would. She pushed him and made sure he signed it. He signed it like the last possible day, I think. And of course, I didn't want him having my new phone number, but since it was at the top of the paperwork, you can be sure he wrote it down so he could message me, and he did. And it was the first message that I got was immediately after he was done over there, and he said, "I've set you free." And I just immediately blocked the number. It's like, nope, not dealing with that. And a few weeks later, I got a message that said, were things really so bad between us that you won't ever speak to me again, or whatever? And I said, "Who's this?" Because I didn't recognize the number. And I just got the letter of his first name back. It's like, nope, know who that is. So I blocked that one too. And I think that happened like August, September. So I knew he had gotten a different phone number. And honestly, I expect that it was so he could tell people I was harassing him. So he had to get a new number. Basically like my story, like why I did get a new phone number. And then it was a little peaceful for a while until I started getting really wound up in November as it approached the time that would be our first post-divorce wedding anniversary. It's like, oh shit, I don't want to hear from him. I don't want to hear from him. Knew I was going to hear from him. And the day came and went. And it's like, I don't want to get too happy about this, but I hadn't heard from him that day. And I didn't know what the deal was until one of my Facebook memories that came up. It was a picture of me holding my mom's dog, and he had commented on the post. And I saw on his comment that his little picture had changed. It's like, and he had some girl in the picture with him. And it's like, oh, thank God. It's like, that's why I didn't hear from him. Otherwise, I know without a doubt I would have. Because I also, he told me of a couple times that he had contacted his first ex because he wanted to see about getting his dog back or something. I don't know. Anyway, I knew he contacted her because he told me. So I fully expected he was going to try something again. And then it was a relief when I found out that, or I found out why he didn't. And then I was just kind of like, oh God, leave me alone. And it sucked because I loved his family. And I think one of the hardest things that I had to do was go through and block everybody that he was connected to just because I didn't want him having access to my stuff anymore. Like, I don't want him to know about any of it. So, when I wake up this morning and I'm thinking about, these cards, and then I'm thinking about this situation, it's like, oh, that's the fear that it was it was trying to warn me about, I guess. Just that he was going to show up after I started this thing, and that has been the snag on why it's been so hard for me to jump into the new things that I'm trying to do. But I think seeing that and knowing that that's the underlying thing is like a sigh of relief, really. Because, yeah, it was a concern. Sorry, it's a little warm. And however legit or not it might seem, that, I mean, it makes perfect sense to me that that was the thing that I was avoiding because I didn't want him to show up again. And honestly, it annoys me that so many of these have talked about him at all, but I also know that as it is my healing journey, it's stuff that I have to face. One of the cards I pulled yesterday from that same deck that was talking about fear was talking about you have to be able to face your fear and see it for what it is before you can move on and be fearless. It's like, well, that makes sense. So, and it's not just stuff with him. I'll have it might be connected to him and yet still having not really anything to do with him, other than something I set in place for myself because I didn't want him to have further access to me, I guess. Yeah. I don't know. You know, it's like I feel like there have been huge spans of time that I have spent working to get through some of the stuff that has come up for me to work through since he's been out of the picture. And like I said in one of the start of these videos, like I really wanted to believe that I was further on this healing process than it seems I was, because I keep having to go back into it and tell the same kind of stories slightly differently, or from a different, or looking at them differently. And I mean, that is the healing journey, really, because it's a cycle through and just kind of get going narrow, more and more narrow down the spiral until you figure out the thing that is the issue at the core of it, and then being able to heal that and then move past it. But it is a pain. But yeah, that kind of, it always annoys me when I have to wake up and he is in any part of any of my thought processes. Luckily, it doesn't happen near as much as it used to. And I mean, the stories keep coming back to it when I do these, but it's temporary. It's just trying to sort through the pieces to really get to the transformation. Anyway, I have nothing else at this moment to ramble through. It's 5:55 on the clock, as I see now that I had to turn the car on to, or turn it on enough to open the windows. So yeah, I think I'm going to try to do more of these and make it a more consistent thing. You know, I started following Aaron Doughty on like YouTube and Instagram and some of that stuff, and back in 2020. And you know, part of this whole path, you know, he was talking about like different meditations and stuff. I started trying to do those, and it's like, when I first started meditating, there was some weird stuff that came up. And God, there's this one night I was doing this meditation before I went to bed, and I had to work the next day, I think. That, or maybe I didn't, I don't know. Anyway, I did this meditation, and then like I'm standing in like this black room or space, and there's like these two purple discs that are spinning in different directions, and you know, one's going vertically and the other's kind of, and the other's kind of horizontal. So I didn't know what it meant, but I remember it was purple and they were spinning, and it's like, what is this? And then it was kind of gone, and then I went to sleep. And when I woke up, The waking up was kind of weird. So I was in my old room at my parents' house. I've since taken over my brother's old room and now have 2 rooms. But I was in the old room and the bed wasn't up against the side wall. And there was just a little bit of a gap in between. And I look over, there's like this alien that just stops and it looks at me. And it's in front of this window. And it's like, it felt like something was checking in on me, is what it felt like. But as soon as I saw that, I like startled myself awake. It's like, creepy. And then I stopped meditating for a while. I did eventually get back into it. It did take a while. Yeah, because there was all sorts of stuff that just freaked me out. But anyway, the point of that, when I started following Aaron's stuff, I don't know how many times I've heard him make the comment about how you have to see yourself as the thing you're trying to be, as the person you want to be, as, you know, the career you want to have, all these things. And just like, don't see yourself as a beginner, just see yourself as the thing. And then start living that way. It's like, ugh. I think I'm at the time where it's time to start living this thing and doing it more deliberately. Maybe find a better way to start those things. They're kind of a little slow to start. But yeah, I think phase 2, as per the Chloe Taylor tarot reading that I watched last night, I think phase 2 of this YouTube thing is doing it more deliberately, and maybe setting the intention ahead of time to have some kind of direction for what I'm doing. So maybe I'll go home tonight and spend some time thinking over what that would look like. Because I don't really... The extent of what I do know is that I've always felt like I'm supposed to be sharing my stories for the sake of helping others who might go through similar situations to find healing. And that's still the underlying big point of it. I guess just navigating through that in the meantime. So yeah. Yeah, I'll do this more often and think on what I want this phase 2 to look like, I guess. So until the next time, which will probably be tomorrow. As always, if you made it this far, I appreciate you. And shoot, even if you didn't make it this far, I still appreciate you, because this gives me the opportunity to do something different than the old me would have, and choosing to do things for me that are also potentially for the purpose of helping others. No, it is for the purpose of helping others. Potentially others will see it. Yeah, that's I think my direction. Anyway, until the next time, bye.